Are you a solopreneur looking to 2 times your revenue to fund your lifestyle and give back? Well, this podcast is for you. We bring you inspirational guests sharing actionable tips to solve many of the struggles you face each and every day. And now over to your host, Paul Higgins.
Hello to the Build, Live, Give podcast. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. And if you enjoy it, please subscribe. If you're a regular, thanks for your support. Love to get your feedback at paul@buildlivegive.com. It means the world to me when someone does. Our guest today is someone who grew up in Hong Kong and started a web development company in 1994. He spent more time educating than building, which led him down a career path of working for corporates when needed and following his passion of writing in his own business in between. He talks about what copywriting is and how you can improve it. This is simply too good to miss. So why listen? The value of stopping the leaks in your website bucket through copywriting. The 2 elements to creating successful online courses and why LinkedIn posting is not a solo sport. They have kindly given you a copy of Better, Stronger, Faster, which really helps you to win in these uncertain times. So over to Stephen Lewis from Taleist. Welcome, Stephen Lewis, to the Build, Live, Give podcast. Stephen's from Taleist. So, Stephen, fantastic to have you on the show today.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes. I know we've been working together for quite some time, but even doing some research on you, I found a lot of things about you that I didn't know. And what I'd love for you to kick off with is something that your friends or family know about you that we wouldn't.
I really care about what I do. Like, that is something I think that surprises people. It's easy to have a job that you do and that you're good at, but to have one that is, the very core of your being. I mean, the other day, my wife Fleur and I were in Sydney and I saw an ad for an English as a second language course, and the slogan was "Learn English Better." And I probably spent 5 minutes thinking, well, do they mean they teach English better than other people, or that you'll learn English better through our method than you would through another, or do they mean that you'll speak English better? I can't walk past a poster without mentally passing it, different sense of pass, and rewriting it.
Yes, well, I must admit I had that when I worked at Coca-Cola with ads. Most people completely turn off ads. I couldn't help but study an ad, and I think it's still something that I have. But look, you've been at it for 26 years, so you've dedicated, let's say, the majority of your life to it. We don't want to talk about any ages here, but tell me a little bit about how you got. From what I can understand, you've had multiple efforts of being in your own business and working for others. Just give us a little bit of a short history of that, and then we'll sort of dig into how you came to running Taleist.
Both in terms of writing and having my own business. When you look back over your life, sometimes it makes logical sense, some of the things you do, and you go, oh my God, I was always going in this direction. And in my case, I think I always wanted to have my own business. So I left university, worked for somebody else, reached a ceiling there. And it was 1994. The internet was becoming a thing. I taught myself how to write web pages, which in those days, for people who've been around for a while, you were dialing up. It was very slow. There were no, web editors where you could actually see what the web page looked like. You couldn't put pictures on a website very easily. I mean, it was primitive.
Yes.
But I loved it. And so it was a hobby that I turned into a business, and it was a terrible business because in 1994, you'd say to somebody, you need a website. They would say to you, what is a website? So you'd spend an hour telling them what a website was. Then they'd say, oh, that's quite interesting. I've also heard of this thing called email. What's email? And then you spend another half an hour on that. And then at the end, they'd say, look, we've got a Yellow Pages ad. We're happy with that. So I loved having my own business. I had picked a terrible business to be in. So then I fell back on writing, which again is something that I'd always wanted to do. Like at school, I'd been a debater. I'd started a school newspaper. I'd written for the newspaper at college. It was just in me. And I think for a lot of writers, it is an impulsion. It's not something you decide to do. It is who you are. And so variously through working for other people in communications roles and spending some time as a journalist, you know, I was around the edges of copywriting all the time. But what really happened was I spent a period of time as a journalist. I was a journalist in Hong Kong, which is where I grew up. It's where I'm from. And if you're an English language journalist in Hong Kong, you will get approached to write for businesses because you're a native English speaker. You write for a living. They need that skill.
Yes.
And so I started being asked to write brochures for people, including Coca-Cola. And I wrote for companies, and I wrote press releases, and I wrote brochures. And I would have called that copywriting then. But I have come to realize through extensive study and dedication to copywriting that a blog post is not copywriting. A brochure that just says we're open between 7 and 9 and we deliver is not copyright. Well, it can be copywriting, but generally the way that most people do it, it's not copywriting. Copywriting is the art of writing something persuasively so that you take somebody from the beginning of what you're writing, and by the end of it, you've got them to take an action. So your blog post about warming winter soup recipes is not copywriting, it's content writing. And a lot of what I was doing was content writing. And then as you start to get drawn into what is copywriting, it is this endlessly fascinating tour of human psychology, which in a way, I suppose, doesn't answer your question about all the people that I've worked for. But in a nutshell, I worked for law firms and banks as an employee, but I've only ever worked as an employee when I haven't been able to be running my own business. There has had to be a reason for it, like I needed a visa to migrate to Australia, or I needed the cash. It's never because I've been drawn to working for somebody else.
Yeah, and you can see, I suppose, the length of time when you read your LinkedIn profile, may suggest that as well. It's like as soon as you can, I'm
out.
You're out, correct.
I'm a terrible employee. I used to work for a bank here in Australia, and I was working 5 days a week, and I wanted to start my own business again. So I asked them to go down to 3 days a week. And I said to them, listen, here's the problem. I'm here 5 days a week. My value to you as a communicator is that I don't write like you and I don't talk like you. But if I stay here 5 days a week, I am going to end up talking about leverage, customer journeys, passion, subject matter experts, and all the other nonsense that is talked in corporate, and my value to you will be gone because my value is communicating clearly. So they let me go to 3 days a week.
Well, when I was at the Coke company that you mentioned before, the Coke company had a Bible of words that they'd created. And we'd often sit in a meeting because we were at that stage I was working for the bottler, and they were the franchisor-franchisee relationship, if you think of it that way. And yeah, we used to just play bullshit bingo, like how many words that don't exist other than the Coke vernacular.
Yes,
I would say it was amazing. And still sometimes I default to that in our own business. And I know when you looked at my website, you tore it apart with, what does this actually mean? And I think that is a gift. And if unfortunately for you, like you said, you can never switch it off, every sign or everything you read. But for your clients, I know from my experience, it's worthwhile. And just quickly on your background, like was there a family history of journalism writing, or was it something?
Not at all. I mean, my father was a working class Englishman who, as he liked to tell us as children, had not eaten in a restaurant until he was in his 20s. He was born in 1935. He did national service. He put himself through university in his late 20s. There was no history. He was a surveyor. And my mum ran bars and restaurants. So, there was nothing there. It was just they created this very middle-class, wordy child.
Very interesting. And your, you talk about the art of copywriting, which I think is a great distinction. Like, who are some of the people that it's influenced you? Who are some of the people that you've followed through your journey?
That is a phenomenal question because if you study copywriting, the same names will come up again and again. So you've got, Gary Halbert, who, will have written things, that you may have heard of. I mean, he's dead now, but his stuff resonates. I mean, John Caples, who wrote, even my father used to quote to me the line, they laughed when I sat down at the piano and then I began to play. That's a John Caples headline, incredibly famous copywriter. Eugene Schwartz, who wrote a book called Breakthrough Advertising, who defined, how you write differently to readers depending on how aware they are of their own problems and your solution and product. And you've got John Carlton, who wrote a famous headline about a one-legged golfer. The thing about copywriting, of course, is it's a little bit like being a stage manager, which I was for a while. You are behind the scenes. The people who know what you do, and the other people, you permeate the culture. So, I mean, to give you a really good example, in the run-up to World War I, the Americans considered it a national security problem that so many Americans had rotting teeth. So they were enlisting servicemen who had rotting teeth and all the problems that are attendant on that. The reason they had rotting teeth was they didn't brush their teeth. Americans did not brush their teeth every day, at the turn of the century. It was a copywriter who wrote about a concept of, when you run your tongue over your teeth, if they're not brushed, you can feel this horrible film. He wrote copy about it. That was Claude Hopkins. And now we all brush our teeth twice a day. That's copywriting. You most of you probably haven't heard of Claude Hopkins, but you do brush your teeth twice a day, and here's why.
Right. Well, it's funny. I think World War II, the reason for the tooth decay was more the fact that Coca-Cola
that's
given to every service person. Correct. That's how it became such a global brand. I think that I forget the quantity, but yeah, every service person had to have X amount of Coca-Cola, and that's how it took a global footprint. And the biggest supporters of you, so obviously there's some brilliant examples, and that'll be all in the show notes, the people you refer to, and a lot of those names I've come across, and especially I think I can't remember Gary's son's name, but I've heard
Bond.
Gary's Bond. That's it. Yes, so I've heard him on a couple of podcasts as well. But who's been the other supporters as you went through this? Had to be in corporate, then run your own business journey.
I think for me, it's been family. It's been, saying to your wife, I think I want to go down to 3 days a week at work. So, I mean, when we met each other, I essentially, I had this 5 day a week job, and, she had worked in corporate since she left university. So to her, the norm was, you work 5 days a week and you see how far up the greasy pole you can get. So I was a bit of a novelty to her in absolutely rejecting all of that, and then turning around and saying, I think I'd like to slice, my income down by 40% and only work 3 days a week in order to build a business. And that's a big thing for a partner to say, okay, have a go, see how you do. And it took at least a year for that to pay off. So that was a year with one of us deciding they only wanted to, work for a part-time wage.
Well, look, I know it's a question I normally ask a little further, but I think it's perfect now. Fleur's going to listen to this podcast. What would you like to say to her about the support she's given you?
Why are you listening to a podcast instead of working? I would say, well, I mean, she now works in the business. So, I mean, that is the close to that loop, is that, Fleur went from being somebody who, had once upon a time had ambitions of writing, who had gone into this 5 day a week cycle, and she came out into the business. And so, I'm glad that I was able to create a business that she could come into. And I'm glad that she's backed me as this business has gone through various stages. I mean, in the beginning, I was writing walking tours of Sydney. So, I mean, we've come a long way from this business writing walking tours of Sydney and teaching people self-publishing to being, some of Australia's better known direct response copywriters. Has been quite the journey.
And a couple of tips for people that are both, well, I know for me, and we talked about this prior, that I'm hoping my wife can help me in my business. any tips on life and business partners in one?
I think you have to try to find your own space, and you have to try to find your own role in the business. And that's where I think I see people doing it best, where they have a clear division between who's responsible for what, because I think it would be very difficult to be in a business where one of you essentially worked for the other, because I think that would be how do you turn that off? Between 9 and 5, I'm the senior person in the business, and after 5, I'm your partner again, and we're equal. Personally, I would find that incredibly difficult to switch modes.
Yeah, well, I think that's why I do run my own business, because I'm definitely number 2 in the household. But Fleur might be listening to this, but I'm pretty sure Linda won't be. So what we'll do is go into the build section, and you've covered it. But when someone says, "Hey, Stephen, how can you help me? What do you do? How do you best answer that?"
It's a difficult one, because we can go big or we can go small. So we can do, we can write a landing page for somebody. So we can bite off. A landing page is a significant project. So I don't mean it's small in that regard, but it's very contained, through to helping somebody to develop a marketing strategy. But generally, I talk about the copywriting side of things, because marketing is even harder to explain than copywriting. And so many people have been stung by a terrible marketer. Mm-hmm. So if you've been stung by a terrible marketer, you are in that once bitten, twice shy area. Whereas, so in terms of explaining the copywriting to people, what I say is, we write the words that make you money. Like, we write the words that will make your phone ring or your email bing with incoming inquiries. That's what we do.
And I know often people are sort of paying for the service pre-revenue in some cases. So some people have got, lovely budgets that I know you deal with, but some people on a landing page, they've done all this hard work, and then it's like, well, this is the last thing. Can I really afford that or make that investment? I'm sure you come up against that all the time. What's your best answer to when someone says that?
I struggled with for a long time, because it's unproven. If you're coming at something pre-revenue, I don't have a baseline to work from, so I can't tell you, listen, you're getting this result from this page, and I can tell you that I can do 100, 200% better in terms of conversions. What I tend to say to people, if they're in that position and money is an issue, I ask them if they're going to be spending money on advertising. Because if you're going to be dropping $2,000 a month on advertising, that's $24,000 a year, then spending money on a copywriter to make sure that as much of the visit, you're buying visitors from Google or Facebook or wherever you're advertising, a good copywriter is going to make sure that as many of those expensive visitors as possible become customers. So in that instance, in my opinion, you can't afford not to. I'm just going to write a post on LinkedIn about it in the near future, that essentially, if I said to you, Paul, I've opened a restaurant, I'm advertising in the local paper, I've got Facebook, I've got Google My Business, I've got a Yelp page, and every day I see people walk up to the front door of my restaurant, I see them look at the menu that I've put outside the restaurant, and I see them turn around and walk away. So I think, stuff it, I'm going to double my advertising spend so that twice as many people come every day and look at the menu outside and turn around and walk out. Yes. You would think that restaurant owner was nuts. But that is what people do every day with their websites. I'll spend $2,000 a month or $10,000 a month. I've done work for a surgeon who was spending $30,000 a month sending traffic to his website and getting a less than 1% conversion rate because he didn't want to spend any money on a copywriter. He'd written the web page himself. We wrote the website for him, the web page for him, got him a 433% improvement in conversions. That essentially meant over the 6 months that he had procrastinated about engaging us, we could have saved him more than $200,000. That was the cost of not doing it. So if you're spending money on advertising, that is where you absolutely can't afford not to have somebody who knows what they're doing, or to take a moment to learn some of the techniques yourself, rather than thinking, my English teacher thought I had a lovely turn of phrase and I work in the business, so why don't I just smash out some copy?
Yeah, because it is, most people listening right now, if they're like me, copy's not something natural. I'm very good at writing corporate emails. I'm getting better at writing, for coaches and consultants, but certainly I think it's a big gap. And I completely agree with you. And I think you're going to also maybe offer a do-it-yourself or an online course if you don't have the budget or the investment right now. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's called the landing page template, and the course is to take you from just really staring at a blank page and not having any idea what to write, or possibly worse, looking at a blank page and then just starting to write because you've got no idea what to say. And you're just going to type. There is a formula to writing a successful landing page. So, you can, I suppose the best way to think about it is there's first aid that you can do on yourself, and then you can go and see a doctor and get it done that much better. But that there's a difference in terms of availability and pricing. The purpose of the course is to take somebody who really just has no idea, or thinks they have an idea but really don't. But I guess somebody who thinks they have an idea wouldn't buy a course. But somebody who has stared at that blank page, or who has written their own landing page and has just watched Google ads hoover up all of their money with no result, they take the course and they learn some of the absolutely powerful fundamentals of copywriting, including a structure for that page. So if you take the course, you will never again look at a blank page and think, I don't even know where to start. You will know where to start, and you will know where to finish, and you will know where to get the information that you need to put in between the top of the page and the bottom of the page to get people to convert. So yes, certainly you could go and spend $6,000 or $10,000 on a professional copywriter, and they would bring even more elements into it, and they would improve the conversion rate even further. But for an investment of a few hours in improving your own skills, you will get, I am guessing, at least double the conversion rate that you would get on your own.
And what is a good conversion rate? I know it's like a piece of string, but you talked before about 1%. What sort of targets do you see your clients setting?
I mean, it is a piece of string because it really depends on what you're selling. So the surgeon, for instance, was selling, he was selling a $20,000 procedure. And if you had the first procedure, there was every chance that you would need the second procedure. So essentially, he was selling a product with a lifetime value of $40,000 US. So from his point of view, he could spend $20,000 on marketing a month, and if he got 4 patients, he was ahead of the game. So it really depends on where you are. Whereas if you're advertising a lower cost item and it's costing you $2.50 every time somebody clicks on Google, then you're going to need a much higher conversion rate. So it depends on the nature of the product or the service, and it also depends on how much you want that conversion to be. So for instance, if I said to you, Paul, my Lamborghini's parked outside, here are the car keys, do you want to take it for a drive around the block? I'm probably going to convert 100% of the men that I make that offer to. If I was to say to you, Paul, here are the keys to my Lamborghini, I'd like you to buy my Lamborghini, I'm going to have a much lower conversion rate, but I'm going to make a lot more money. So it really is about how high is the barrier and what is it you're trying to do. So in a lot of cases, the conversion that you're looking for is not for somebody to buy, it's for somebody to get in touch with you, for instance.
Mm. And for you, so for example, with the new online course, what have you set as an internal goal for the conversion of the landing page?
From my point of view, I have a target number of people that I would like to take the course every month, because a big part of our situation right now is the world has been turned upside down and had its pocket shaken out. And we've been wanting for a long time to start doing courses, because I mean, that is another side of, what I really enjoy is teaching, because I'm passionate about what I do, which is getting the right information in front of the right people in a persuasive way. So copywriting isn't about convincing Eskimos to buy ice. Copywriting is about saying, hey, Paul, you've got a really good service. You are an excellent coach. You are perfect for this group of people. How do we persuade that group of people that you are the right choice so that you're happy and they're happy? So it's a phenomenally enjoyable thing to teach, right? Because essentially what I want to do is I want to take people who are good at what they do and put them in front of the people who would benefit from that and show them how to persuade those people that they're making the right choice. So teaching is really exciting to me. And as you can tell, it's something I'm hugely enthusiastic about. So we want to make more courses. So essentially I have a goal of how many people I want to be teaching every month in the first year. And that's how I'll be measuring it. And what I'm conscious of, because, earlier in my business career, I would have been looking at this and saying, well, if I can't get 1,000 people into this course in the first 2 weeks, what's the point of doing the course? As you get a bit older and wiser, you realize that your conversion rate today will be less than your conversion rate is tomorrow, because right now this is a brand new course. I have testimonials from people who've taken other courses. I have testimonials from clients that I've written for. I have no word of mouth on the course because only one person has taken it, because I did it as a one-on-one prototype with somebody. So the conversion rate will increase over time as well. So you have to sometimes you have to take a longer view of your conversion rate because it will mature.
And speaking of online courses, so obviously that prototype, and I know you're very involved in doing research when you did my landing pages. Your research was excellent and it certainly helped shape the result. What are some other tips for people listening right now, like myself, that are heavily reliant upon memberships and would love to add more value and teach more people through courses? What are some learnings you've had, even in the last round, that you could share?
From putting together a course?
Yeah.
Always. I mean, I'll go back a step. So I started online courses for the first time probably 6 or 7 years ago, so early that Udemy, if you're familiar with Udemy, which is a big marketplace for courses, Udemy got in touch with me to ask me to go into Udemy to sell my courses, which, for reference these days is a little bit like the Apple App Store phoning you up and saying, hey, you look like you've got an app. Would you like to come in our store, right? These days, Apple does not pick up the phone to you to invite you. You beg Apple to put you in the App Store. So it was a long time ago. And courses in a way suit me because writers tend to be introverted. So we like sitting in our rooms by ourselves writing. So creating a course is incredibly appealing for that reason, an online course, because you get to sit in your ivory tower and just create the course and then put it out. You don't have to deal with people. So I was very attracted to it. And so I spent a long time making a course. And the problem with doing that is you've committed it to video, you've committed it to writing before any human being has taken the course and asked you questions and said, hang on a minute, I'm not quite getting that bit. Now, if you do it live and you see that somebody's not getting quite that bit, when you get round to committing it to a pre-recorded course, you will answer that in the way that you've seen working with real people, rather than going, bloody hell, that lesson in that course isn't working. I've got to re-record that 10-minute or 25-minute video or 4 videos or whatever it might be. So with the landing page template, for instance, my course on writing a landing page, as I say, I've done it once through with one test subject one-on-one. He's a guy I didn't know, so I didn't do it with a friend. Like, it was genuinely with a new business. But he asked questions that I hadn't anticipated. I've been able to adapt the course based on his feedback. So, on what worked for him, I had done what I tend to do, which is over-egg the pudding. Like, I love teaching, so I am going to squeeze as much material into a course as possible, sometimes to the point of overwhelming somebody. Maybe it should have been 2 courses, or a 101 and then a 201, or whatever the next step up is in American education. So what I would suggest is really try and run it. Try to run it with at least one group of people live. It doesn't have to be in person. The guy that I'm talking about, he's in London, I'm in Sydney. We ran it perfectly successfully over Zoom, but I have not committed anything to pre-recording before I run it at least a few times first. That is the biggest thing that I've learned. And the second biggest thing I would say is, if you can possibly avoid it, don't try to teach people technology, because I've done it. I'm teaching copywriting, and the principles of copywriting are timeless, right? You might read about something on Facebook today and some other amazing hologram platform tomorrow, but the psychology that you employ to make your buying decision hasn't changed since we were cavemen. So my principles are timeless. But if you try to teach somebody Facebook, God help you, because Facebook will change its look, its feel, and its rules every 15 minutes without notice, and you will be going back to your course saying, that entire section is now redundant because that feature doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, look, so true, so true. And I wrote my book. I don't think I took that advice myself well enough, because I'm sure that a lot of the technology I've put in my book, I always put the category and then the recommended, knowing that was the case. But yeah, look, it's so true. Even you think of the tools and technology that we're using now, even to 6 months ago, especially in the pandemic we're in, a lot has changed. And the last question in the build section I want to ask you is around LinkedIn. So I know that, we've been working together for a while on LinkedIn, but just give us a quick snapshot of, where you were before we started working together, and sort of what have been some of the outcomes as you've gone through that journey.
LinkedIn is, I was an early adopter of LinkedIn. So one of the reasons I didn't want to torture you with my business history was because there's been, so much. The common thread has always been communication. But, back in 2005, I had a social media agency teaching people how to use social media. And to put that in perspective, Twitter didn't start till 2006. And in 2005, you couldn't get a Facebook membership if you weren't at a university in the US. And I had a social media agency. So once again, way too early to be in that business. But LinkedIn, of course, I was an early adopter of it because I was in a social media agency. And LinkedIn was just a place where you dumped your CV. And if you don't want to work for anybody, why do you want to dump your CV anywhere? I didn't want to be an employee, and LinkedIn was a site for employees and wannabe employees to dump their CVs for recruiters to find them. So I missed a lot of the evolution of LinkedIn after that because I just ignored it. So when I kept hearing maybe a year ago, 2 years ago now, that LinkedIn was big and it had changed and it really was a vibrant community where business was done, I didn't know anything about it, so I got in. I'd occasionally put up a post. The post would sink like a weighted body. I just couldn't get it at all. And it wasn't really until you and I started working together that I realized not only do you need a system and a plan and support, you need somebody who's on top of where LinkedIn is flowing, where LinkedIn is changing, what it's doing, because, LinkedIn is not different from Facebook and the others in that it will change its mind overnight about what it's going to do. It won't tell you. LinkedIn's not going to send you a message saying, hey, Paul, we've decided to weight the algorithm differently. So you actually need that support. And I think it's one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make is the mistake that I made, which is thinking, if I put a post up on LinkedIn, everyone who follows me will see it. I've got 750 connections. Brilliant. That's 750 people following me. And of course, as you know, that isn't how it works at all.
No.
So you're better off not posting, in my opinion, because it takes time, than, just posting and hoping. You need a plan. You need support.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And, if the benefit is really about getting that team and, it's not posting at this stage, the way that the algorithm works, it's not a team sport. And I do also love the community aspect. I know we had a call this morning with some people around the world and just how we can help each other because we've got, similar objectives of helping others. I think it works really well. So before we go into the live section, why don't I just tell you a little bit more about our community, which is a nice foray into what Stephen's talking about. So it's called The Authority Machine, and you can actually watch a free pre-recorded masterclass at blgclick.com. And what it's going to give you is the real behind the scenes secrets that Stephen and a couple of other people around the world, so let's say there's a big community, about 100 people have learnt. So we'll teach you how to trigger the formula to get 10 times your views. We'll also show you the 7 killer steps to turn views into likes and comments by your ideal clients. And we'll also show you how to convert those into relationships. And I don't think there's ever been a more important time to be adding value. And we talked about it this morning where there's really 3 key elements to LinkedIn. There's your profile, because I think most people go to that even before your website. The second is giving value-added content. And then the third thing is actually building those relationships. And I think, Stephen and I both spoke about it today, where people are referring people these days based on the quality of content you're doing. And if you want to see some of the best quality written content, which probably won't surprise you, go and read some of Stephen's posts. I have to have a box of tissues with me most times when I read them. So you can go and find out more about the Authority Machine at blgclick.com. So the next section is the live section, Stephen. So what are some daily habits that help you be successful?
I love to plan out, not plan out the day, but write out, the goals for the day. And this is an evolving, process because I really enjoyed. I was using something called a Panda Planner, which is a silly name. There's probably some story behind it, but it sounds like a Hello Kitty planner. But it was not. It was, it's all about how you enforce habits through consistency and thinking about the right things, and it has elements like gratitude. So you would start the day, and again, God knows if some of my friends could hear me now talking about the fact that I write 3 things I'm grateful for down in the morning. I would laugh at them. They would laugh at me. But it's phenomenal. It's incredibly, and particularly now, to think about the good things. And then at the end of the day, to write down the things that you've accomplished. But in the morning, writing down what are the big things that I have to do today. And before I write those down, I have a look at what is at least my monthly goal and then my weekly goal, because I've had to learn that you can write a to-do list that says, write these 4 landing pages between Monday and Friday, but I can't. That won't happen. So what is a realistic amount of work to do? And what am I actually trying to achieve overall? And then bringing all of those things together in one day so that I'm certain I'm moving the ball forward in the way that I had planned to move the ball, or towards the goal that I had set.
Excellent. And I know that you posted recently a couple of new team members that you've put on, which are your delightful 2 daughters. But what are some of the learnings or some of the lifestyle changes you think you're going to keep post this pandemic, whenever that is? But what are some of the things that you will make new habits?
After we had our call this morning, so I kick off on LinkedIn at 7:00 in the morning. But after we had our early morning call this morning, I went for a run, Paul.
Excellent.
It wasn't a pretty sight, and sometimes in the past when I've been running, I have driven away from my neighbourhood in order to spare my neighbours the sight of me wobbling around the streets. But I thought, screw it. So I have been running. I have been cycling. I've got a seat on the back, so I can take one of the girls at a time, and I'm keen to keep that going. I think we've been doing a little bit more cooking, which has been nice. And because the changes are unsettling for the girls who are 4 and 6, we've been making more of an effort to have dinner together and those sorts of things. And, because, Zoe, who's 6, hasn't been going to school, and Charlotte, who's 4, only just started back at preschool this week, we've had them around a lot more. So we've been going for walks and scooter rides. I would like to think that I'm going to keep those things up.
Yes, well, the only word that my mother, my dear mother who passed away last year, is she said should be no such word as think in the English language. So, I'd love to keep you accountable to doing those, because it's wonderful, right? It's the feeling of mine are a bit older, but it's the same thing. Beating my son in chess at the moment is just a joy I never want to end. So the next into the give section, which might be relevant for what you're doing at the moment, but what's a charity or a community that you'd love to support, and why?
I very much the local community here where I am. That is it's always been a great community. As I say, I'm from Hong Kong, it's a difficult thing to say when you're a white man, because people look at you like you're bizarre. But I lived half of my life in Hong Kong. I grew up there. I went to school there. My first jobs, my first businesses were all there. And I have never known many of my neighbours. In childhood I did. But here, when I moved to my neighbourhood in Sydney, which is Rozelle, the lady who delivers our post introduced herself. I have never lived somewhere where the postwoman would have introduced herself. And the other day, there was we've got multiple local Facebook groups about who's doing it tough, who needs help. There was a post up recently that said Linda, the postwoman, couldn't get any toilet paper. So literally, some of my neighbours pursued Linda around her route to give her 2 rolls of toilet paper. Linda has since started feeding some of her neighbours who can't get government assistance and don't have any food. So the neighbours on my street have clubbed together and are buying food for Linda to give to her neighbours. I've never lived anywhere where that would have happened before. I would name another suburb of Sydney in which I lived, but that would be rude. But I can tell you it would not have happened there. If your neighbour's house was on fire, you'd be complaining about the smoke. That is what would have happened in that neighbourhood.
Yeah, well, look, I was very fortunate to be brought up in the country until I was 5, and then spent a lot of my childhood back there for holidays. And I think at the moment I'm loving the fact that you can walk past someone and they actually do wave and smile and say hello, because for years I've always been the odd guy in the city doing it, because that was just standard in the country. You don't walk past anyone without talking to them, and sometimes that's why they don't do a lot, because they might talk to them for 3 or 4 hours. But it's great to see that in the community. So the last section is the action section. Oh, yeah. And what I'll do is ask some questions and get some rapid fire responses from you. So the first is, what are your top 3 personal effectiveness tips?
You've got to have a system. You've got to know, you've got to have a system. And if you're doing repeatable things, then have a process to make them as repeatable as possible. Set your agenda in the morning, and in my case, start as early as humanly possible, because I'm compos mentis in the morning and it's all downhill from there.
Excellent. Well, maybe the running will fix that. And the next is, what tech is essential to running your business?
We use Harvest for time tracking. We don't charge by time. However, it's an important internal measurement of how long things take. And when you track your time, you can no longer have any delusions that things just took an hour or just took 10 minutes. And then if they're services that you sell, then you can be much more realistic about how you charge for them. It's much easier to turn to a client and name a figure that you're potentially slightly uncomfortable with when you know something took you 15 hours. Because when that client's there going, oh, that's easy, how hard could that be? You're like, well, it takes 15 hours for me and I know what I'm doing. So it would take 100 hours for you or more, and you'd get a lesser result. I'm comfortable with the number that I'm naming. So I find it very useful For that.
Yeah, sorry, you go.
I was just going to say, I mean, we use Pipedrive as our CRM. I mean, I used to put Post-it notes of inquiries on a whiteboard, and then because I didn't like following people up, because I don't like selling, eventually the glue would rot on the Post-it note and it would fall off the whiteboard. I mean, so inefficient. Whereas Pipedrive is great for forcing you to continue to look at the inquiries that you've got and that you're making and to pursue the next action, which is brilliant.
Great. Well, other than staring at posters and looking at everyone's copy, what is other sources for you of getting great ideas?
Great writers. I'm not saying I am a great writer. I'm just saying all writers who want to be good, let alone great, read. And the wider you read, you know, the better. So, I mean, you know, this morning I wrote a post that was inspired by a biography I was reading of Kim Jong-un in North Korea, and I've drafted another post for LinkedIn that is based on a New York Times article interview I was reading with Jerry Seinfeld. So the wider you read, the more you know, and you know the amazing places that your ideas come from. You just don't know where an idea is going to come from, but if you keep your reading and research narrow, you're just limiting the possibilities.
Brilliant. And the last question is always the biggest, and I save it to the end. But what impact do you want to leave on the world?
We went through a branding exercise about 18 months ago, and when the branding agency said to me, what's your purpose? I said to them, my purpose is ridding the world of bullshit, one sentence at a time. And so that to me is a really good day, is a day where I've rid the world of a little bit of bullshit. If I can just persuade people that you don't build something out, you just build it. You don't on-forward things, you just forward them. You don't self-isolate, you just isolate. You don't self-feed, you just feed. That is a great day for me. So if my legacy was persuading fewer people to say leverage, passion, customer journey, subject matter expert, utilize. I've got small ambitions, Paul. That would be enough for me. 10 fewer people in the world who say utilize instead of use. I'm a happy man.
Yes, well, like I said, you'd have a field day in the cake company, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So, look, brilliant having you on. I thoroughly enjoy reading your posts every day. Like I said, they bring a tear of joy to my eyes, but also give me some really valuable content. So definitely check out Stephen Lewis on LinkedIn, all of what he's mentioned, and that will be in the show notes. And he's also kindly given us a little gift of a great course. So if you go to, you explain it, Stephen. You'll do a better job of the mate.
When the world got turned upside down, this year, I thought to myself, we spent a lot of time thinking about things that would work for our clients in a changed climate and things that would work for us. And I took all of the ideas that we had, which are researched and proven to be working right now. And I put them together in a downloadable PDF called Better, Stronger, Faster, which for those of you who are old enough to remember is what they said of the $6 million man. We can rebuild him better, stronger, faster. So if you're wanting to retain your existing clients or even gain new clients, even in a difficult time, it's just full of ideas that, as I say, read widely. You don't know what might inspire you. It's a quick read. There might be something in there, and you can get it from Taleist, which is the name of my company, which is TALEIST. So tale as in telling tales, ist as in expert teller of tales, Taleist.agency/BLG.
Brilliant. I couldn't have said it any better myself. And just as a quick side note there, I did have a $6 million man when I was 6, and I threw him up in the air and he smashed. And I can tell you, they cannot be rebuilt. It was a very sad day. And my dad said, well, son, there's a lesson. Do not throw your $6 million man up in front of concrete. So there we go.
They were wise, your parents.
They were. And, and I won't say what that forced me to then go and do, because I did have neighbours with dolls, but let's say that I didn't take one of those to school. So Awesome having you on, Stephen. It's an absolute pleasure knowing you and listening or reading every word that you put to paper. So well done, and thanks for coming on today.
Thanks, Paul.
I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Longer than normal, but worth every extra minute. You can get the show notes at buildlivegive.com. If you believe someone you know would benefit from the show, and I'm sure there's so many, please share it. Stephen would love to get your feedback and appreciation on LinkedIn. And as I said in the podcast, his LinkedIn posts are sublime, worth listening to. His profile will be in the show notes. You can learn the 3 secrets to build your authority on LinkedIn in our free pre-recorded masterclass. Just go to blgclick.com, find out how Stephen's been successful by learning the secrets yourself. Please take action to build your business and lifestyle, and stay well.
Thank you for listening to the Build, Live, Give podcast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. It would mean the world to us.